Q&A segment. This is where we're happy to address any questions you have about data mining and predictive analytics. You can think of this as the free consulting segment of our webinar. Open access to gurus Tony and Scott. And like I say, there's plenty of room for more questions, and for each one you'll get 2 or 3 perspectives. We do have a few questions coming in now. Just enter your questions into the text field of the webinar panel, and I'll be pleased to read them aloud for myself, Tony, or Scott to respond to. So the first question comes from Sanjeev. This is kind of a popular question. What are the best methods and tools for customer churn prediction modeling? I think we might preface that with, if you're looking at tools, we would assume that you're further down the process, that you've already done a lot of your project planning, project definition, a lot of your assessment of your environment, the business objectives, the understanding your data, and even starting a pilot with open source software until you get a better understanding of the software requirements that you need to ensure that you make a right-sized investment. So let me make sure I go in here and unmute everybody. And let's put that question out first to Scott. What are the best methods and tools for customer churn prediction modeling? And feel free to put your own caveats in front of that. Scott?
Okay, super. It's good. It's a great question. It's a popular type of predictive model. You know, I think I have a pat answer for anything that's prefaced with best. Best to me has nothing to do with software. It really has more to do with the analyst himself, because the software is just a tool, and the tool is never any better than the analyst who's using it. Now, with that being said, I would probably say that the 3 most frequent methods that are used with churn analysis is Cox regression, survival analysis, and also just good old plain old-fashioned classification. Of those 3, if you're looking to minimize your risk of inaccurate predictions, since the first 2 are quantitative predictions, classification is probably where you're going to have your greatest chances of success.
Terrific advice. Thank you, Scott. Tony, would you like to extend?
Yes, and I think Scott pointed in the right direction, as you did, Eric. This is not so much about a software tool that's appropriate as much as it is about selecting appropriate algorithms and techniques to apply to the type of problem you're working on. And assuming with churn that we are going into a classification problem, something like linear regression or decision trees, shade cart, things that are good at identifying categories as opposed to other techniques that are better suited towards the estimation of values is really the distinction that we want to keep in mind there. It's not a software-specific solution as much as it's the individual techniques. We're looking for those techniques that cut things up into parts as opposed to measuring, which are, again, tools like logistic regression, shade cart, decision trees that are better suited towards classification types of problems.
Great advice. Bliss asks, can a newbie get employed based on the training that you offer? And thanks for that question, Bliss. First thing I would say is that you do get a certificate at the end of training, and of course that helps with your professional profile. But let me tell you this: there's a lot of other courses out there where you'll get a certificate, but we do make you work for this one. Like I say, it's a very concentrated course. If you do take the strategic implementation course, it's a full week-long, very aggressive course that goes over the strategic and tactical views, and that's what I think would equip you better than any certificate. Is having that strategic view, the project planning view, is truly unique to any training that we've seen out there. There's plenty of training on methods and tactics, although not much of it is vendor neutral. But it's developing a lot of the soft skills that are fully unique out there. To step back and say, I'm not going to just jump in with software and data. I'm going to back up for a moment and make sure that I have a more comprehensive assessment of the environment, of leadership's expectations, of any kind of strategic yellow flags that need to be resolved before you even begin the modeling. I mean, are there even some political conflicts that could affect the ultimate adoption of the system? How will it need to be made actionable? Are there some hindrances to that we can identify before modeling? Those are a lot of the considerations and realities of modeling that we provide in the training that we just don't find anywhere else, and we keep our eye on the landscape of offerings that are out there. That is what I believe will have you stand out and be very unique. And when you go in for an interview, you're going to speak very intelligently and differently than any other candidate with very compelling considerations when you go into that interview and somebody asks you about how you're going to prepare a more accurate model, and you argue with them in the most diplomatic way possible that model accuracy is only applicable if the project is defined and designed appropriately. Otherwise, you're just going to have a faster car running in the wrong direction. So that's where I think we can have a much greater impact on making you commercially very attractive and unique when you go in for an interview. That's my take on it. Let's start with you, Tony. If somebody comes to our training, wants to look better on their profile, what do you think about our training, making them unique?
Well, and I think you're absolutely correct, Eric. I think what we address that's a little bit different is that we are looking at real-world decision-making and supporting the business environment, and that's our focus, is enhancing organizational performance. And anyone who's attended our courses and appreciates that perspective is going to differentiate themselves in any interview. Having said that, I'm also going to suggest that going out and buying a set of custom golf clubs and having a week's worth of lessons with a professional golfer is not going to make you a professional golfer. It's going to take some practice. This is not something you're going to master in a week. You're going to have the tools, you're going to have the mentality, and then you're going to need a fair amount of practice to actually be competent and proficient at developing these solutions, especially in a new environment that you'd be walking into in a new organization. But I think there is a lot of demand out there for people who do have a business orientation and understand the perspective. And attending the course gives you that perspective and points you out in the right direction and differentiates you from the people with a strong quantitative background only without the real-world decision-making perspective.
Yeah, that's right. Good points. And Scott, when I take Bliss's question over to you, he further qualified it to say my question, I qualify my question to mean learning the core modeling concepts you offer. And Tony, you're probably grinning right now because a lot of those core modeling concepts are conveyed even before you step into the classroom. There's nearly 4 hours of prerequisite training before you come into any of the predictive analytics and data mining courses that you'll take. They're remote training sessions, 10 modules, anywhere from 15 to 40 minutes each. And that's where a lot of the core methods are taught, and then they're extended. I mean, if you're talking more about the tactics and methods, that's more around the model development course. And again, if you're looking to be commercially competitive, that'll certainly equip you, but it won't. I don't think that'll make you really unique in the industry. But having further qualified that, Scott, would you like to extend?
Well, I think that's a great question and a very fair question. I'll kind of bounce off of what you said, Eric, as well as Tony. And if I extend the metaphor I used earlier, that software is just a tool and the tool's no better than the analyst who uses them, the same thing applies to the class. Of course, there are a lot of factors that impact what is success, but you know, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. We've had people who've come to the class and they haven't done the prerequisite 4 hours, and quite frankly, they'll be lost. If you do the prerequisite 4 hours and you engage yourself in the class and you do the assignments and you do the work, then you're going to be in a whole lot better shape than people who don't. You're not going to get it through osmosis. When it comes to specific methods and techniques, I think Tony would wholeheartedly agree with this. Probably the most important thing that we teach is not algorithms, believe it or not. That's one of the biggest fallacies of the industry out there. Algorithms are just tools again. If we can help you learn how to think about a problem in order to solve the problem so that you define it and set your objectives correctly, then you're going to be ahead of just about every other analyst out there who just dumps data into software and sees what pops out on the other side. And also it depends upon what a newbie is. You know, we have people from very diverse backgrounds who come into the class. We have people who have some tech backgrounds. We have some people who don't have tech backgrounds. We have some people who have some quantitative backgrounds already, and other people who don't. So a lot of it depends upon where you're coming from as a newbie into the industry. But the most important ingredient is not just sitting in class. The most important ingredient is being the analyst yourself and involving yourself in the class. You'll get the most out of it if you do that.
Well, thanks, Scott. You just corrected me. I promised a lot of people about our osmosis feature, but they're actually going to have to show up in class. All right. So we'll take one more question here coming up on the 30 minutes over, which you should never do in a webinar, but we hope everyone appreciates the additional content, and we had obviously a lot to cover, and we always enjoy the interaction of the Q&A. Mary Ann asks, and Tony, I'm going to go to Scott first this time for this question. You're going to have to hold your breath, and that's not going to be easy. Mary Ann asks, how can I be a better data scientist? And we had some discussions in Los Angeles when we sat down just a couple of weeks ago around this. So I'll hold my breath as well. Scott, let's have you go first on this. How can one be a better data scientist? And I do have some advice. I'll go last on this. But what's your opinion around data scientist, which has become such a popular label yet and doesn't seem to really have a single definition of what that role covers?
Well, you kind of preempted me in that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
My initial was use the term early. Use it every chance you have, and then it'll kind of stick to you. But in reality, being a data scientist is a term. It's a term that's very popular. It's a whole lot more attractive and sexy than saying I'm an analyst or I'm a modeler. So the term has got some traction. Unfortunately, the term kind of preceded the definition, and so the definition of what a data scientist is kind of lagging behind. But you know, the core things that we teach in the courses are common to a lot of different disciplines and labels. If you're into machine learning, you're gonna learn the kind of stuff that you need to know in our courses. If you're into an older term called database marketing, you're going to learn the kind of things that you need to know. If you're into fraud detection, there's a lot of different labels, but really they all overlap to a large degree. And whether you call yourself a data scientist, whether you call yourself a predictive analyst or modeler, the core concepts are what's important, and that's what we try to convey.
Yeah, great points. I promise to hold my breath. So Tony, let her rip.
Actually, I'd like to take this in two parts, and first of all, answer the question directly. Yes, the material that we offer is going to make you a better data scientist because we do cover all three perspectives. Project planning is really geared towards the business perspective, making sure that we understand what it is we're trying to model, how we enhance business performance. We do talk, especially in Prepare and as part of the data issues in the planning around the IT and the data-related issues, which is a completely different perspective that requires a high level of expertise. And then we also address and build a number of the algorithms and the approaches that are taken there, and then we extend it with how to actually ensure that we are going to confirm and validate these processes and a lot of the organizational aspects around adoption and what the next steps are in the replace phase. So to answer your question, yes, this is going to make you a better data scientist. Now, having said that, I don't think a data scientist exists. There is nobody in a modern organization that has the skill sets at the high level of competency that's required in all three areas of business, data, and quantitative techniques rolled up into one person. I believe that we do have data science teams, and our project teams are really geared to incorporate all of those skill sets that are necessary to do this kind of work successfully. So that's the long, short version of the two parts of that answer.
Absolutely, yeah, and well stated. And before I wrap up, Scott, any other rebuttal around data scientist or data science?
I'd underscore everything that Tony just said, and I'd underscore it doubly. It's probably are a few true data scientists out there, but they're the vast exception rather than the rule. And if you're going to try to be all things to all people, guess what you're going to wind up being? You're going to wind up being not much. So, learn the core concepts. Learn how to think about a problem, how to frame a problem correctly for a good solution, and that's the key to success.
Absolutely, and I mean that's the emphasis of the webinar. We have so many questions that talk about how do we build a more powerful rocket and sophisticated technology, but there's not a lot of questions about the mission plan. So we launch it out into space without understanding what we're to achieve, what we're to bring home, when we're to be back, and all the things that make the mission successful. So that's probably the biggest point we can make to this. And with data science and data scientists, unfortunately, a lot of people are using that label loosely, and I think it's starting to dilute the power of that title. We'll see how it settles out in time, but I think a lot of people do expect it to, that title to be the role of data scientists to be more of a managerial oversight of the entire analytic practice with all aspects underneath it. Difficult to fulfill all of those, but from a higher level management position, I suppose that is possible to oversee the team. But then how does scientists fit into that? And that's where I have trouble getting the two to reconcile. So great discussions. And but at 30 minutes after the hour and going a half an hour overall on the webinar, we better draw this event to a close. Certainly want to thank our attendees today for your greatly sustained interest and your active participation, as well as Scott and Tony for your great segments and, of course, your valuable and entertaining Q&A contributions. We'll follow up with an email shortly with some resources and suggestions that will hopefully be useful to you from there. We hope you've offered permission already for us to stay in touch through the Modeling Agency's quarterly newsletter, and that you'll consider joining us soon at a public training event. Remember that you can still reserve a space in the Washington, D.C. production if you move quickly, or secure the very early bird discount for the Denver July production if you register by May 5th. And again, if you would like to benefit for your early efforts, instead of just reducing the bill for your organization, we can hand you up to $200 in Visa gift cards at the course instead for your own personal use. You can select which discount you'd like to receive in the online registration form. And don't forget that your colleagues can join anytime for up to 30% off. Now, if you don't have a training or travel budget but would like the guidance of a seasoned mentor, you might be interested in the Modeling Agency's Wire Support program. Wire Support is essentially a retainer account that provides remote open access to a TMA senior consultant. Simply open up a Wire Support account, and you've instantly added a wealth of experience and capability to your existing bench without expanding payroll, administrating complicated contracts, or taking elevated risk on larger commitments. We'll get you the answers you want, guide you through it, show you how it's done, implement any data mining tasks you may wish to delegate, and then remain on call until the next time you need us. And meanwhile, when we're not actively working, you're not paying a dime. So a link to the Wire Support description page will be among the resources included in the follow-up email. On behalf of myself, Tony, and Scott, thank you again for attending Data Mining Failure to Launch. Have a very pleasant afternoon, and this brings the webinar broadcast to a close.